for this session. So last time we discussed about let's see here how we view ourselves, right? The square box, we have like a attachment there in that square. So our mind could not be limited within a place, right? So that's what is meaning about here. Okay, now the next one is the reviewing the real. Okay, let me read this first. All living beings from the time Buddha beginnings have disregarded their own shell by clinging to external object, thereby missing their fundamental mind. Thus, they are being turned round by object and visit large and small size. If we can turn the object round, they will be like the Tathagata, and their body's mind will be in a state of radiant perfection from the immutable holy site. The end of each of the hair will contain all the lengths in the 10 direction. So again, the Buddha said that as soon as we let go of some kind of attachment, so we can see, we can recognize our own mind, our fundamental mind, as mean the basic mind, the pure nature. And at that time, we can recognize at the end of each hair, they will contain all lengths in the same direction. Is that understandable, or is that practical, William? What do you think about this sentence? The end of each of their hairs will contain all the lengths in 10 directions. Is that logical? Is that reasonable? What do you think?
It's definitely by normal logic, normal reason. It it doesn't make sense from that perspective. It's from someone who's realized enlightenment. It makes total sense too, is my understanding. But for myself, I kind of have a sense of it, but I don't think I fully understand it. But it's common in the teachings, about the largest is the smallest too, and about how just the differences, the distinctions of large and small, they lose relevance in the absolute mind, because large and small are all relative.
Yes.
And the sort of the essence of large and small comes from this this mind, but can't really describe this mind. So yeah, distinctions don't really mean anything in the absolute sense.
Ivan, what do you think about this sense then? Is that logical, reasonable, or what do you think about this sense then?
So my relation to this, right? So turn objects around, perceive them large or small. It reads to me very much of this state I get into, or an engineer gets into, where they can see things from all angles and in a 3D projection inside their own head and spin it around, but in a greater encompassment. You're not designing a toaster and spinning it around and taking it apart in your head and seeing all the nuts and bolts and heating coils, putting it back together. It's this idea that you can perceive more than just the toaster sitting on your counter. You can perceive the entire kitchen, the entire house, the entire breadth of the lawn from your single position of that object or you.
Okay, now we don't need to talk about certificate, a lofty idea. Talk about the physical things that we can see. Can you see the chip, right? Sorry, can you see the jump drive, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
In this jump drive, we can keep the whole library. Is that right?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Physically, we can perceive now. Of course, the last 100 years ago, right, we could not recognize us. But now, because of the advance of technology, right, they use we call nano, right, nano chip, and so forth. And especially they do this type of jump drive, and it may contain the whole libraries of books. This is inconceivable. And only when technology advances, we can see how the Buddha said. And of course, in the meanings here that one is all in one. What's what it's about? Even in one hair, it contains the whole universe. The whole universe is in one hair. That's the meaning there. One and all in one. That's what talk about our pure mind there. So we can recognize now with this type of scientific events, right? Okay. All right, go ahead, please, William.
Removing the essence of perception to wipe out the fifth aggregate and eighth consciousness. Eradicating attachment to the ego to reveal the one reality. Ananda asked, if this essence of seeing is my wondrous nature, the latter should manifest before me. If seeing is my real ego, then what are my body and mind? But in fact, my body and mind can discern things, whereas that seeing cannot discern my body. If perception is my mind and causes me to see things, then this perception is my ego, whereas my body is not. This is exactly what the Buddha previously refuted, with the argument that objects should then see me. Will you be compassionate enough to enlighten me?
You got that?
A little bit of trouble following it. So if this essence of seeing is my wondrous nature, that makes sense. The latter should manifest before me. So the essence of seeing should manifest, or the wondrous nature should manifest before me. So that I don't understand why Ananda is drawing that conclusion. If the essence of seeing is my wondrous nature, then my wondrous nature should manifest before me.
Yeah.
Well, then it's like, well, what's me? We said the me is the essence of seeing can only be called as self. So how could the essence of seeing see itself? Like, how could it appear kind of separate in that sense?
Yeah, that's why he's still confused. No matter what he say, he's still confused. He should follow the tail. Yeah, you see that? He should follow the tails. He should follow the his Buddha explanation. Whichever Buddha say, he should follow the tail.
Okay.
That's the point. That's why he confused. Yeah. So that's why he say, if sin is my real ego, then where is my body and mind? So he's still confused between the body and mind and ego, and even the pure nature or sin nature.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a little hard to follow. And I don't get what he's saying. My body and mind can discern things because the body by itself can't discern. Like a dead body is discerning nothing. So it's like, it can't be saying that the body is really discerning anything. Perhaps it's a instrument where senses are housed, and that can then be used in the process of discernment. It makes sense that the mind goes through processes, the small mind goes through processes to discern, and then the seeing nature is witnessing that discernment of the mind, but that mind's function depends upon that deeper nature. And the deeper nature doesn't depend upon that small mind. So, and it's saying, whereas the seeing cannot discern my body.
That's why he confused.
Yeah, it seems confusing.
Yeah, confused. And even he expanded, if my perception, the perception is my mind and cause me to see. So he, remember, he connect or think the perception is his own mind. Perception is that his thinking in his mind, right? Then he said that is my ego then. And my body is not my ego. Whereas my body is not. So his, again, one more time, he said that his thinking is his ego, not the body at all. Be exactly what the Buddha appears depute. Object should then see me. So that's why he confused, go back and forth between his mind thinking and pure mind there. Right, Ivan? You follow, Ivan?
I do follow.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, please, next one.
The rooting out Ananda's misconception of objects being and not being perception. Misconception of object being perception. The Buddha replied, Ananda, your conception of perception being in front of you is incorrect, because if it is, the essence of perception should have a position which can be shown. Also, you sit in Jedavana Park. You see its trees and nullahs as well as this hall with the sun and moon overhead and the Ganges in the distance, as you are now in front of my lion's seat, moving your head to point to the surroundings, such as the dark foliage of the wood, the bright sun blocking walls and clear open spaces, as well as grass, plants, and very small things. Although they are of different sizes, each of them can be pointed out. If they are really your seeing manifesting in front of you, you should be able to be shown which one is your seeing.
You follow? You follow what he say about?
It kind of echoes the previous thing too, of like sitting in the hall. Can you see through the window or the doorway and see the world outside, but with the candlelight, etc. But he's sitting in a park. Can you scroll to the other page, Ty, please? And you know your position, you know what you're looking at, and you can point them out with your eyes. As you move your eyes, you move your head, but yet none of them is your seeing. The object that you are seeing is not your seeing.
Otherwise, this has the location, right?
Yeah. Place in space, not the sense or the tool itself.
Is that understandable, William?
Yeah, it's a little, the idea that the perception would be in an object outside of like the body. It's kind of that, even that's like, how would one even come to that conclusion that, if I'm looking at that tree, my perception would be anchored in the tree. So I don't think I understood what Ananda's initial confusion was. that the Buddha is using this analogy, which seems very obvious. Like, yeah, of course, those things aren't my perception, aren't the essence of my perception. So Nanda was thinking that he was saying his perception was his true self. Yeah, I think that's where I'm not quite sure what Ananda's mistake was, that the Buddha is using this example.
Somehow he put them together, right? The thinking, perception, his ego, and the pure mind, I see nature is the same. He consider them all are the same.
Oh, so it's like he's seeing the pure nature as invested in a phenomena, would be the same as like investing the pure nature into something you saw visibly, because you see those, you can witness the thinking in your mind, your perceptions in your mind. And to invest that with the pure nature is just as much a mistake as to invest a tree, saying just that tree is where my pure nature is from.
And that's his ego too.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Ananda, you should know that if voidness is your sin, since it has already become your perception, then how can it be empty? If an external thing is your sin and has already become your perception, how can it be external? So after the setting all things in front of you, pick out the bright and the pure principle of your perception and show it to me to prove that it is clearly and we repeatedly identical with the external. So that's why here the Buddha dispute. So the voidness would not be the sin, and the external things is not the being of the external things is not the sin nature. So that's why he asked if he could pick out and dissect them to see whether they are the same or not. So basically, he wanted to dispute all the whether it's just ethanol things um, or the perception, whether it's in or out, they would not be identical, right? Is that understandable, right? Or is it a bit confusion? What do you think, William?
I I think it's understandable, yeah, based on the previous part. Except that, so if you should know that if your voidness is your seeing, since it's already, if voidness is your seeing, since it's already become your perception, how then can it be empty?
So if it's out there, it's just your sin. How could it be empty?
Yeah.
So he's the pure that.
Yeah, because if it's your seeing, then it wouldn't really be voidness.
Okay.
And
All right.
then,
Let's move down to the bottom. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Ananda said, "From this hall I now see the Ganges in the distance, the sun or moon overhead, and all that I can point out with my finger and see with my eyes. They are all external things, but not one of them is my perception. World honored one, as the Buddha has said, not only a beginner in the Sravaka stage like myself who is still in the stream of transmigration, but even a bodhisattva cannot dissect things and pick out the essence of seeing, which has an independent nature apart from phenomena." So now Ananda is acknowledging that, none of these objects that he can point out, none of these external things is his perception. And he's also, I think, being compassionate for himself, because he's saying, like, of course someone at my stage couldn't pick out, the true nature. Even there are bodhisattvas that even can't do that. So, how could I do that?
Okay. Yeah, so so Buddha approved now, right? That's good, right? Right, Ivan, you got that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Please go ahead.
The Buddha said, correct. Misconception of objects not being perception. The Buddha said, as you have said, there is no essence of seeing with an independent nature apart from phenomena. Now, if there is no perception in the things you point out, I now ask again, as you and Tathagata visit the Jetavana Park, when you see the wood and all the externals, including the sun or moon, if there is no essence of seeing which can be picked from them, tell me which one is not the seeing. Ananda replied, of all things seen in the Jetavana Park, I do not know which one is not the seeing. Why? Because if the trees are not the seeing, why do I see them? If they are the seeing, why are they trees? If the void is not the seeing, why do I see it? If the void is the seeing, why is it empty? I too have thought carefully about all this and now conclude that each one of them is the seeing.
Thanks.
He's projecting. Trying to thrust his sense or knowledge of seeing upon essentially just words to some extent without fully understanding their being meaning or the perception in which he perceives them.
William, what do you think about this process?
Yeah, I think the Buddha's kind of walking Ananda through a pretty fine line between confusion. The line of like clarity and wisdom is kind of fine, because initially the Buddha is saying, your seeing cannot be ascribed to an object. But then in this next part, it's saying that like the seeing is also like can't be separate from an object. That it's like so there's a sense of a viewer and a thing which is viewed. And so then the viewing, the seeing, is kind of the unification of the sense of the viewer and the sense of the thing that's being viewed. So the seeing can't really be said to be separate from either of those things. All of those things are part of a totality. That's in its essence is like before thought is it's not distinct, it's not separate. So, and I can also see the Buddha said correct. you have it almost covered. But so that's a clue too of which direction he's going, is that that in a way the objects are the seeing, because it's all one event.
In the sense that the external object is a manifestation of our sin nature. That's all the sense of that. They are our mind, manifestation of our mind or our pure nature, whichever we see out there. So according to our knowledge, according to our culture, tradition, and so forth. The sin nature is different from thinking in the way that we recognize them in our sense. Right? And today I have the class with my student. I ask them the difference between the gut feeling and the thinking. Ivan, can you define the difference between our gut feeling and the thinking? our intuition and our thinking. Can you define the difference?
Intuition is feeling without knowing, but thought or consciousness is knowing without feeling. It's like perceive versus judge almost.
How are you, William? What do you think?
Seems that intuition is happening, the mechanics of it are happening unconsciously or subconsciously, where there certainly is information coming in that's been processed, and it points us in a particular direction, do this, don't do that, this is right, this is wrong, but we don't consciously think about it, we don't consciously analyze it. It's an what's the word I'm looking for? It's like kind of an uninvestigated conclusion that comes from unconscious processing.
In the Zen tradition, they say that we see things in the naked eyes. And for the thinking, it's like we wear the black glass or the yellow, the blue, and so forth. When we wear this kind of glasses, right? If we wear the yellow one, we see everything is yellow. When we wear the black one, we see everything is black. So that's what they're thinking about, because the thinking relates to how we analyze things based on our perception, on our knowledge, tradition, and so forth. We filter out those kind of information in our own sense. But for the intuition, we see things as the way they are. That's all. That is the important right here. Let's talk about here too. So here the Buddha say the old things out there is just a manifestation of sin. That's all. So that's why in Zen tradition is encourage us that not to use our analytical thinking. Just see as the way they are. The pure seeing, the naked seeing. Ivan, you follow, right?
I do follow.
William, right? William, right?
Yes, Tay.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one. Again, would I say correct? Correct. In the assembly, all those who have not achieved the stage beyond study were very surprised after hearing the Buddha say this. They failed to understand his meanings and were perturbed and throw up balance. The Buddha realized their perplexity and alarm and took compassion on them, saying, "Virtuous one, men, the words of the King of Supreme Law are true, accord with the varieties, and are neither deceitful nor false, unlike those of the heretics whose sermons are arbitrary and harmless. Now listen attentively. Your faith in me should not be in vain." So the Buddha confirmed or reaffirmed, don't worry, whichever thing I say, I will say the truth or will not deceive you. Now that's what I'm here for you, to teach you, even you're still confused, right? Yeah. Please go ahead, William.
Manjushri's helpful interposition. Thereupon Manjushri Bodhisattva, who took compassion on the four Varga, rose from his seat, prostrated himself at the Buddha's feet, brought his two palms together and said, "World-honored one, these people do not understand the Tathagata's twofold revelation of the reality and unreality of the essence of perception in form and voidness. They think that if causal form and voidness are the seeing, there should be an indication of it, and if they are not, there should be no seeing. They do not understand your teaching and are therefore surprised and bewildered, but they are not like those whose roots are frivolous and inferior. May the Tathagata be compassionate enough to enlighten them, so that they know what objects and this essence of perception are fundamentally, and that there exists neither is nor is not between them. At the very end there, I think there's a grammatical issue. That maybe something that happened in the translation that grammatically doesn't seem to make sense. But Manjushri, steps in and is clearly, the Buddha knows the confusion that people have, but Manjushri is explaining the confusion. So, of the revelation of reality and unreality, of the essence of perception in form and voidness. So, because first you would say, no individual object is you're seeing, but all of them are you're seeing, including your, the voidness. So it's kind of like that the reality and the unreality are that, they aren't and they are. Mm-hmm. I think that's how I understand it, and I hope you'll correct me, Tay, if I misunderstand this.
I think later on, the Buddha will ask the monk to illustrate what's the point here. Here we just play around with the wording, so a little bit confusion. It will be more clear and later on. Yeah, that's why in Zen tradition they don't like to talk much. The more you talk, the more confused you may have, the more confusion you may have. So don't worry about that. Yeah. So
okay.
The thinking of cultural form and oneness, and and so forth. Yeah. All right. So
okay.
Here, yeah. Ivan, please.
The Buddha declared to
Manjuri
and the assembly, to all Tathagatas and great bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, abiding in the state of samsara, seeing in its concurrent causes, as well as all forms imaginable, are like flowers in the sky which fundamentally do not exist. The seeing and its causes are essentially the profound, pure, and bright substance of enlightenment. How can there be is and is not within it? Manjuris, I now ask you this. You are already the real Manjuris. Can there be another Manjuri who first is and then is not? He's issuing a challenge. Essentially, can you be and not be all in the same place?
If you're real one, so they cannot find is or is not, right? If you're real, just real one, right?
Yeah. If it's tangible, show me that it's tangible. But if it's not, it's not. But yeah.
Yeah. Manjuri replied, no, only once. I am the real Manjuri, and there cannot be another. Why? Because if this, then there will be two Manjuri. But my presence here does not mean there is no Manjuri. With an arbitrary conception of is and is not in between. So if you real, get real. If that pure mind, if that pure sin, that's just pure sin. No matter what you say, whether it's there or not, it's still the sin there in the practical sense. Yeah. Please, William.
And isn't that passage reminds me of, I recall in Swanhua's commentary on something, I think it was the Jewel Platform Sutra, he would talk about putting a head on top of a head.
Yeah, in this sutra, I talk about that. That's
okay.
We have the pure mind already. Oh, okay. Basically, Ivan, you know about that story?
No.
Right. William, could you elaborate that, please?
I can't. I don't remember the story. I just remember that concept of a head on top of a head. Like so there's already a head there.
So the story is so one man in the morning, he looked himself in the mirror and he see his face and his head, right? So when he walk away, he say, "Oh, I lost my head." So he hold his head and turn around. "Oh, I lost my head. Where's my head?" So what I say, that's crazy. As that, he used a type of analogy and say that you have the pure mind already, and you don't need to look for another pure mind. You have the seeing nature already. You don't need to look for another seeing nature like this one. You have the, so Manjuri say his Manjuri. That's he has his pure mind there. Whether it's there or not, it's still there. It's still his pure mind. No matter what he say, no matter what people say. That's the concept. That's the analogy. Every one of us has a pure mind. But if you look for another pure mind, you be in disaster. So let's say that's so applicable in our meditation. Let's say when we sit in and our mind is so pure, our mind so calm, and if you say, "Oh, is my mind so calm? And my mind so pure?" That means you have another thought to look for the calmness of your mind. That that still up that calmness, right, William? Is it follow right? Ivan, you understand that?
Yes,
You there.
Yeah.
You don't need to think more. That's there. The only thing is to live with that. That's all. You need to seek for it. It's there, right there. When am I so calm? Where am I so pure? That's all. But if you look for another pure mind, another calm mind, you raise your get disturbance. You raise the problems. You have the head already. You run around with carrying the head around. Look for the head. Okay, good. All right, let's move on then. Which one is that?
so it's the Buddha said. I think yeah, because I just made a comment
please
before.
go ahead.
Yeah.
William, please.
The Buddha said, likewise, this clear seeing, as well as the objects and the void, are fundamentally the perfect, pure, true mind of the wonderful, bright, supreme Bodhi, wrongly perceived as form and voidness, as well as hearing and seeing, just as a second moon is perceived with the accompanying misconception of real and unreal moons. Manjushri, there is only one real moon which is beyond the condition of is and is not. Therefore, if you discern seeing and its objects and give rise to all kinds of mental creation, this is wrong thinking which will prevent you from getting out of this dual condition of is and is not. If you look into them by means of this true, essential, wonderful, bright, and enlightened nature, it will enable you to avoid this duality. So yeah, that is or is not is like if we're trying to figure something out, we're pursuing duality. We're trying to draw boundaries. We're trying to set up rules, and those are creations of thinking. And we don't need to create anything for the pure mind to exist. So we're never going to be able to say, here's the pure mind, or the pure mind is this. It's a like an absence of spinning the wheel of thought. It's already, I mean, even in spinning the wheel of thought, the pure mind is still there. We just may not, we're just not conscious of it. Or, and yeah, and I don't even know that it's like, could we, if we could even say that we in enlightenment that it's like we're conscious of the pure mind, because that's more kind of duality of either we are or we aren't consciousness. Everything just is as it is.
I think if you remember the sense of the patriarch Huay Nang, right? He told the monk that chased after him to get the bow and the rope, but later he turned around and asked the teacher. The Sid patriarch Huay Nang asked him, if you don't think good or bad, wholesome and unwholesome, where's your pure mind? What's your original mind? You follow Ivan?
I do. It's
So if you
yeah.
don't think about good or bad, pure and impure, wholesome and unwholesome, according to his question, what is your original mind? Yeah, William, what do you think?
And I said if I don't think.
That's all.
Yeah, if no, I know what you mean. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, it takes it, you know, it takes one to it takes me to a place where the usefulness of thinking stops. And it's, to me, it kind of feels like an ice cube that's slowly melting. If I like keep attention in that space where it's not an active process, but there's something, you know, there's something happening to the small mind when I do that, where it feels like it's kind of gradually becoming more fluid, as opposed to as kind of densely focused on thought.
Remember, sometime I mentioned about in the ACT and the DBT, right? That dialectic behavior therapies. Sorry, sorry. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapies that provide the treatment for the depression people, and the ACT it works the same way, in the way that in the CBT that's derived by the Western psychologist, he mentioned that okay, you need to replace your negative thought with a positive thought. What do you think, Ivan? Does this work well? Or you think it's possible to replace the negative thought because of the reason why they have depression, because they have all kind of negative thoughts about themselves? The psychologist suggests them, okay, get replace the positive thought. What do you think? What's the problem with replacing the positive with the negative one? Oh, sorry, replace the negative one with the positive one. What's the problem then?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of research on cognitive behavioral therapy, peer-reviewed things showing that it works, it doesn't work. It's a reframing tool, right? If you reframe it and it looks like this and not like that, then how do you perceive the world? You know, I like it, but part of it always felt like rose-colored glasses to me, right? You just put on the rose-colored glasses and it doesn't actually get rid of the things. It just repaints your world.
Yeah.
I
So
guess
what's the problem?
in a different way.
So what's the problem then?
It doesn't bring you back to center, really. And like, so what I'm thinking about too with this pure mind is, so like I do flow arts, I do martial arts and stuff. A lot of this state of the pure mind, and like even what's being discussed here in the sutra, reminds me a lot of like flow state, as it's referred to, right? And I can pull up a graph at some point and show, but flow state on a graph, right, is skill level on one, and I don't remember what's on the vertical axis, but if you're, you know, low skill, low something, you end up in frustration and boredom, you know, or at the bottom. But and then at the top side, right, you have high skill and high aptitude, you can end up in boredom. You know what you're doing, but when you meet that middle of all the quadrants where you're at a good skill level, you can shut your brain off and just flow and be there and enter this state of happening, right? The moves aren't thought about, they just flow through you. You know, they're already kind of programmed there. And like the idea too with flow and flow state is to achieve a state of this like moving meditation that is life too, right? We are conscious of our decisions, but yet we flow through it or with it, and they flow through us. And like it neither is nor is not. It is a happening, an occurrence.
Yeah, like what you say, the framing and recalling, right? Either way, it's like we pour. Let's see here. We have the pendulum. Let's see here. I can display to you here. Let's see here. You see my mouse, right? It's swinging back and forth, right? Left and right, right and left, left and right. If we reframe it, oh, I like the left. No, I like the right. It's still unbalanced. That's why if we replace the positive thought, the negative thought with the positive one, it's still reframing. It's still recalling that type of problem there. It won't be solved. And that's why it would not work well with others. So that's why in the ACT, acceptance and commitment therapies, they just say, accept them. Whether we have good thought, bad thought, accept them who we are. And if we calm down the mind, it's much easier. When we accept the screening, right? When we accept the screening, eventually there's no force. And eventually there's no force to apply to the screening mouse anymore. And eventually if we fall down in the middle, we don't need to do anything. Yeah, accept and let it be. So that's what it's about. So whenever we still jump back and forth between duality, that's where we get stuck then. That's where we get the problem. That's where we have all kind of suffering, all kind of fighting, all kind of like, dislike, and so forth. Yeah, so I think somehow the one who created the mindfulness-based therapies, they understand this kind of concept of non-duality in this field. We talked about this right before, right, William?
Oh yes, many weeks. We went through like a couple dozen articles about it.
Yeah, and that's why people love that. As long as we accept them and let them go, we'll come back to a peaceful mind. We come back to the equilibrium of our mind. It will stabilize our mind. Otherwise, we just play good and bad parts, the negative, and it's still greater problems. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, Ivan, can you read this?
Wiping out Alea's self evidencing to reveal one reality, Ananda's discrimination. Ananda said, World honored one, the king of the law has preached the nature of casual enlightenment, Bodhi, which is always present in the 10 directions and which is beyond birth and death. Does this differ from the concept of primordial I don't know that word, profundity, according to the profundity, according to the doctrine of Kapala, and that a true ego pervading everywhere according to heterodox aesthetics, who cover their heads with ashes and dust. The Buddha, while on Lanka Mountain, once said to Mahamati, heretics always speak of natural existence, but I preach causes and conditions, which are beyond the stage they have reached. Now, as I look into the nature of enlightenment, it is self existence above birth and death and beyond all falsehood and inversion. There seems to be neither your causes and conditions nor their natural existence. Will you please teach us so that we shall not fall into heresies, but win the bright nature of the wonderful, enlightened, true mind? I understand parts of it, right? Looking at the true ego, I don't, I guess the people that are covering their heads with ashes and dust is a separate religious sect in India.
Yeah.
And then discussing the state at which they've meditated to or achieved enlightenment to as a natural existence, where Buddha is looking at causes and conditions, where karma and samsara, rule in different understanding.
Mm.
And then, asking to be a student of the Buddha.
You follow William about this passage?
Yeah, so he's saying like, okay, now that I've come to this understanding of the all things being a manifestation of this bright, pure mind, how is this different from the ascetics who say that, there's this the ego pervades all things, this true self that pervades all things. I think, and I think I understand the answer to that. I think it's that, well, the doctrine of Kapila, a true ego pervading everywhere, where there's still the sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
There's still this sense of there is a central thing which can be discussed and talked about as a distinct thing. Whereas the bright pure mind, there's no mark of self within it. This idea of self is totally gone.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the causes and conditions part makes sense, because Ananda's trying to understand how, like, okay, yeah, this pure mind is kind of beyond causes and conditions. So, like, what's that about? Because you told Mahamadi before that causes and conditions were beyond this law that the heretics preach, this false law the heretics preach. So, but it seems that, you need to understand causes and conditions, because without cultivating appropriate causes and conditions, you can never realize the true mind.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's always existent, but what does that matter if you can't realize it? Or it's always existent and non-existent, and neither existent nor non-existent.
Yeah, that's why later on we talk about conventional truth and ultimate truth here, right? In conventional way, yes, we talk about the cause and condition, right? But in the ultimate truth, there's no in the ultimate truth, that means that the pure mind that go beyond from the cause and condition. Yeah, when we still have some kind of attachment, yes, we need to raise good karma instead of the bad one. But if we want to develop or live with a pure nature, we need to get go of that kind of good and bad. Of course, until we do that, we need to recognize where we are, right? Okay, so let's stop here today, and next week we can continue then. Yeah, so Ivan, right? You follow, right, Ivan?
Yeah, I follow.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, um, all right. So I think we get closer and it's more understandable, more clear. All right. So thank you. So see you then.
Thank you,
Thank
Tay.
you.